Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Casey Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. With the pandemic, which keeps stretching on, one thing has become very clear. The digital arena is where it's at for all of us. But did you know there's an organization dedicated to providing free tech education and job placement opportunities? That organization is Launchcode, and we are so glad to have with us today the executive director and the creative mind behind Launchcode. That's Jeff Mazur. Welcome, Jeff. So good to see you.
It's great to be with you today, Ruth. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Launchcode. Somebody might jump on with this webcast and go, oh, we're talking space. Well, space, but in a different context, right?
Exactly, Ruth. Cyberspace, maybe. But Launchcode is indeed, as you noted, focused on how we really create new tech talent in a world that has a grand need for it today, given the shape of economies and the way, particularly as you noted during the pandemic, that so many pieces of business take place in the digital realm. And so Launchcode is an organization, a nonprofit that's a little over 7 years old now, that was created particularly for the purpose of enabling more people to build the skills that are necessary to step into jobs in technology and help feed that need that exists in the business world for people with those technical skills.
Gotta ask the devil's advocate question. Wasn't there enough out there to educate people? What's different about Launchcode?
Sure. Well, if you look at the traditional means by which someone goes into the kind of careers that Launchcode prepares people for, you actually find that the pathway was pretty narrow. Over history, if you wanted to work as a software developer, software engineer, or web developer, the usual path was, with some exceptions, to go and get a 4-year degree, oftentimes in computer science or some kind of engineering field. And we know what the challenges are that exist for higher education for many people, that the cost is substantial. The debt load that people take on to go down the higher education path can be crushing for people, particularly if they have trouble getting a job on the back end. And so that really confines the number of people who are able to access that. And in recent years, let's say the last 10 years, there have been the development and proliferation of other kinds of skilling models to bring people into software careers. In particular, a thing you hear about sometimes are software boot camps. And typically these are largely for-profit organizations that charge you $12,000, $13,000, $15,000 for a 13, 15-week course to give you skills to become a software developer or software engineer. But even $14,000 or $13,000 given the nature of the economy now is oftentimes too high a barrier for people to come in. And so for Launchcode, we said, what are the barriers to people entering? Cost is certainly one, accessibility being another. And we set about, the organization set about on this journey of trying to understand and figure out how can we successfully knock down those barriers so we can open these doors to many, many more people. And at the top of the list, we said, we have to do this for free. And so I think while there may be many different ways to gain technical skills out there, you're going to find very few organizations or opportunities to earn high quality job focused skills in software development where you as a learner have absolutely no responsibility to pay anything. And that's really the world that we've been trying to build at Launchcode in Kansas City and elsewhere.
For free?
For free, yes. This doesn't cost anything to participants. This is that is the barrier in so many ways. And I love to, sometimes statistics are really enlightening when it comes to thinking about why these things can be such a barrier. If you figure that the typical college degree may cost someone, at the low end, $30,000 or $40,000, and that's a lot of money. When you think about statistics that we see from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that we saw last year that they shared, and they said that fully 44% of workers in the U.S. between the ages of 18 and 64 are low-wage workers. That's people who are earning an average of $18,000 a year. So if you have this huge portion of the population that is really earning less than subsistence wages, and you want to give those people an opportunity to get ahead, asking them to put any cash on the barrelhead to do that or take on debt is really not a great way to bring those people into that world. And so we really feel like that's a vital part of what we do at Launchcode, is providing people who are driven to do this work and who are really excited and passionate about technology, but have been foreclosed from those opportunities. We can open a door to them. And by virtue of terrific support, philanthropic support from great partners like the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, we've been able to build programs that open the doors to people for free in large numbers so they can gain those skills and walk into these careers.
So let's dive deep into Launchcode. When you say you're providing free education, what does that mean? I'm an applicant.
Sure.
What am I going to get?
For sure. So the idea at Launchcode is, how can we, in the quickest possible way and the most accessible way, give you skills that will allow you to step into a first job in technology, usually as a junior software developer or web developer. So we've built a curriculum that is designed to not be theoretical or academic. It's designed to be practical and deliver you with skills that, as you walk into a first job, you'll probably need to use in some way, shape, or form on the first week, first month, first quarter doing that work. We've also built that in order to encourage and induce within people the idea that you really have to be a lifelong learner in order to succeed in this field, because, as I'm sure you know, technology is not static. It's constantly changing, and the technologies that are in use today are very likely to be different from the ones that are in use 6, 9, 18 months from now. And so developing a mindset that says, I'm going to build practical skills today, but I'm also going to align myself to the idea that I'm going to have to continue learning all through my career, is a very important part of what Launchcode does. And from a very practical nuts and bolts standpoint, what that's meant for us is, in Kansas City, for instance, delivering what we call our flagship program, which is called LC 101. And what that has looked like historically has been a 20-week program where people are in a classroom 2 evenings a week for 3 hours per session. And they're doing probably 15 hours of work a week outside the classroom on their own time. And over the course of that period, they're learning the fundamentals of programming in a language called JavaScript, which is a very widely used front-end programming language. And then they're going to get a deep dive in the second unit, the second half of the course, into a programming language called Java, or sometimes C#, both of which are employable languages where, when someone builds capacity in these front-end and back-end languages, they can become and work in full-stack development jobs. And so we provide those technical skills over the course of that 20-week part-time class. We also build into that program some additional quasi-technical components of job readiness, things like, am I prepared as an applicant and then a candidate to be successful in a technical live coding interview where I've got to stand at a whiteboard and solve some kind of problem in code? Do I have a resume that speaks to my actual marketable skills in technology? Am I able to be successful in communicating in a behavioral interview in a way that transmits my value as a prospective employee? And do I have a completed, polished portfolio project where I can, in an interview with an employer, kind of walk them through my application or my site that I've built and show them the skills that I've developed and the different technologies that I understand? And so we've built this curriculum and this model for deployment that allows us to do all those things for our learners. And if they get to the end of that process, then they're really well positioned for us to take them to an employer. And in Kansas City, it's oftentimes a commerce bank or a VML Y&R or an exciting new startup company like Payit. And they are hungry for talented people who have these skills. And by virtue of having gone through a program like ours, oftentimes in 6, 8, 9 months, someone is able to go from zero exposure to coding in the past to the beginning of a career that's really going to allow them to access middle-class wages, sustain their family, and put themselves on a much, much better trajectory.
It sounds like you're educating to lift up, move forward.
This is in most ways intended to be a practical affair. This is not about teaching people. Education for its own sake is great, and education to fulfill someone's desire and curiosity is a wonderful thing. But what we've tried to build is a practical program that's geared towards helping people and empowering people make very practical changes in their lives. And we see people all the time who who have not had the opportunity perhaps to do any post-secondary learning. And if you are that person, and if you've got children ages 3 and 5, and you're working 23 hours a week at 2 different low-wage or part-time jobs just to put food on the table, you're going to feel pretty locked in. And there aren't going to be many practical ways for you to figure out how you earn $60,000 a year. And so our goal has always been, how do we speak to the needs of that individual who has no money to pay for it, has limited time on which they can't jump into learning 40 hours a week, right? Because you have real life in the way. But give someone an opportunity to access those skills, do that work so they can change the shape of their family's lives and put themselves in a much, much different position. And that is, as you said, about lifting people up, or more accurately, it's not really about us lifting them up. It's putting them in a place where they have access to the tools that allow them to lift themselves up. And 9 times out of 10, what we see is people who are incredible, driven, remarkable people who've simply not had the right door opened to them in the past. And Launchcode opens that door, and they're able to make this really practical decision that leads to consequential change in their life.
In Kansas City, how many folks have gone through your program since you kind of landed here in 2016, I believe?
Yeah, sure. So I think the number is in the neighborhood of 700 or 800 people have enrolled in a Launchcode program in the time we've been working there. We know of around 200 people who have started careers in technology by virtue of having gone through one of either Launchcode's placement channels or gone through one of our programs and getting a job on their own. And so we've seen literally hundreds of lives where people are building skills, learning something new, developing something new inside themselves, and oftentimes starting great new careers by virtue of what they've been able to access at Launchcode.
How did you develop the curriculum?
Sure. So there's a great story about how education first started at Launchcode, and the founder of Launchcode is a guy named Jim McKelvey, who was the co-founder of a company you've probably heard of called Square, mobile payment system company. And Jim is from St. Louis, and he started Launchcode because he saw this need that employers had for technical talent that wasn't being met. And so he launched Launchcode as a part of filling that need. And in the early going, it was really just about matching people who already had skills but no job with employers who needed skilled people. There was no education component. What Jim saw ultimately was, hey, this is a great model, but there aren't enough people that have existing skills already. So we've got to find a way to give people skills at scale and for free so we can fill this pipeline and get more skilled people to give to employers. And he started by, as you do when you're a nonprofit organization that doesn't have much in the way of resource and is really resource constrained, he found something that was free out there. And that happened to be, at the time, this course called CS50X, which is Harvard University's Intro to Computer Science for non-computer science majors. And they make that curriculum free and available online via this edX platform. And so Jim said, hey, this is great. I think if we get people, tell people to take this class, if they make it through, I think we can say with a high degree of certainty that these are people who will be able to place, because it's hard to get through this class. And so the curriculum just started out by saying, hey, here's this free thing online, take it and tell us when you finish it. If you show us that you finish it, then we'll try and get a job for you. What we ultimately learned was that's a hard course. It's a great course, but it's fairly academic. It's not designed to build practical job skills in the learner. And so what we did was went on this journey in really 2015 of building out this LC 101 curriculum. And it was really a process of taking all of the data that we gathered from our employer partners. So we have this team of people who go out and they're asking employers every day, hey, what job recs do you have open for entry-level software developers? Give us those. Tell us about those. And so we'd collected thousands of pieces of data from employers that were job openings that said, these are the skills that I need. And so in aggregating all that data, we were able to get a really beautiful and clear picture of what it was that at a landscape level, employers were looking for. And that allowed us to build this LC 101 curriculum in the most exacting and practical way that said, hey, when we look at all the need that's out there among employers, these are the skills that they're really looking for. These are the capacities that they really want an entry-level person to have. And so we started to build that curriculum, and it's changed since then. We change the course slightly every time we deliver it to make minor corrections, and every 3 years it gets an entire overhaul. So in 2019, we took the curriculum from over its history, having been fundamentals taught in Python and then a job-focused skill track in Java. We took out the Python and we put in JavaScript because we felt that was more reflective of what was happening in the tech landscape and in the employer landscape. And so we have this really powerful job-focused, refined curriculum that we know speaks to the needs that employers have in the marketplace. And really, that's what people want. That's what employers want, and that's what people want to learn. They don't want to learn something that is useful only in the most abstract sense. They want to learn something that speaks to the things that employers are asking for when they're in a job interview.
Practicalities. We're going to take a quick break, and after this, we're going to learn more about Launchcode and how maybe you can get involved. We're talking with Jeff Mazur with Launchcode, this great nonprofit delivers us free education for those who want to get into the tech world at a probably a more beginning, slightly above. We were talking curriculum. Talk about who your average student is. Who is coming to you, and how are they finding out about you?
Sure. Everybody has their own story, right? We can talk about groups of people that we tend to serve, but everyone is unique and they're coming to us from a different place. But I think what we see in the typical launch coder, to the degree there is one, it's usually been someone that's sort of post-college years age. The fat part of the bell curve for Launchcode participants over time has really probably been like 24 to 40 in that age range. And within that universe of people, we see folks coming from a lot of different backgrounds. There's the person who has never before engaged with college or post-secondary learning, who has been probably shuffling around from one non-career path job to another and views this as an entry point to continue learning, to really get a leg up. There are lots of folks who come to Launchcode who do have a post-secondary credential, and sometimes that's a 4-year degree. We see lots of folks who are maybe 26 years old. They've been out of college for a few years. They still have $44K in college debt that they're trying to pay off, and their degree in French or in English Lit hasn't yielded them a career path job. And so they're working as a barista. They're working in the hospitality industry, just trying to make ends meet. And at that point, you're not really well positioned to plunk down more cash to earn a new skill if you've already had that experience and it hasn't worked out for you. And so a lot of people are in that place. And then there are a number of people, and these may be folks who are oftentimes maybe at a little bit older end of the spectrum, people who have had a career of some sort, but the floor has fallen out from under that career. So we see the economy changing in ways that where automation has an impact on certain industries, and it pushes people out of jobs that they may have been in for a long time, and then they're at loose ends to figure out what the next thing is. And so we have a lot of people for whom Launchcode represents an opportunity to make a career change, put them back in the workforce. We see lots of times people who leave the workforce for one reason or another. Maybe it's someone who it's a woman who leaves the workforce and spends 5 or 6 years raising her family or her children. And even if she has really strong skills and had really great experience before, oftentimes that transition back in can be a very difficult one. And so Launchcode can provide another point of entry to someone who's been separated from work for some time. So lots of different pathways in. What I would say is the unifying factor in all of this is that the people who come to Launchcode and who are successful in Launchcode, they recognize that they have a desire to do something and build something new for themselves, and that this gives them the tools and the opportunity to do that in a way that maybe they felt they haven't had access to via other means. And they find us lots of ways. Hopefully people will find us by virtue of Casey Cares and this segment at some point, but we do find a lot of people through digital and social media. So, Facebook is a place where a lot of people are, billions of people, and we can target people there who are interested in a technology career or who are interested in specific kinds of hobbies. If you designate that you're interested in gaming, for instance, there's a better than average possibility that you may be someone who has an interest in software or code. And so we can kind of go in there and find people and tell them about our opportunity that induces them to make an application and learn more about Launchcode. So we find a lot of people out there. And then particularly in places like Kansas City, where we've been working for some time, we develop a word of mouth network. People go through the class and they get something out of it, and they tell their girlfriend, uncle, aunt, nephew, daughter, son, friend, a fellow parishioner, whoever it may be, about this program that they went through, and that winds up being a driver of new applicants and new interest in what we're doing.
In terms of applying, do you have particular requirements? Because you're giving a free curriculum that you, I assume, have to go out and fundraise to support it.
Sure. No, it's a great question. And we do. We have an application process. And, what that looks like, we try and keep it simple. We don't want to scare people off, but we do want to help people understand that this is a hard course. It's a hard thing you're going to try and learn. So it's not going to be a walk in the park. But what we do, we try and understand a few different things about an applicant. We want to understand their general aptitude, and that's a hard thing to gauge often, but we use a thing called a HackerRank test, which is basically a set of logic questions where someone goes online, they do the test, and it generates a score. It tells us a little bit about where they're starting from in terms of their logical reasoning proficiency. We also want to dig into other things about the person that are more intangible, in particular passion and drive. And so we ask applicants to answer some short answer essay questions that tell us, hey, like, why do you want to do this? What is it about technology that makes you want to take this hard course that's geared towards getting a job in tech? And we want to hear people tell us about, like, the people who wind up being most successful are the ones who say, well, hey, like, my internet stopped working, and so I took apart my router, and then I had to look up online what I had to do. And that's the person, like, all right, this person is passionate about technology, not just in some generic sense, but in a way that leads them to ask harder questions and to try and go down the road of figuring out. That's a person who is highly likely to be successful. And then on the drive front, we call it drive, but you might refer to it as resilience or grit, or one of these other sometimes hard to define characteristics. But it's really about, are you a person who, if you take this class, when you reach that point, which you inevitably will, where you feel like you can't go any further because it has gotten too hard for you, is your natural inclination to walk away from it forever? Or is your natural inclination to walk away from it for a moment and then come back and try and push through that wall and persist and get through to the end? And it's hard to gauge those things through a short answer question, but you see repeatedly people who can provide examples from their own experience of how they've dealt with adversity and how they've pushed through. And those wind up being really, really key characteristics of successful launch coders. We take all that data. We take demographic data from applicants. We want to make sure we've got a cohort of learners that is reflective of the demographics of Kansas City. And we put all those things together, and we create a cohort of learners that we think, is going to be additive to the talent base in KC, and it is going to be full of people who have the genuine capacity to be successful in the course.
Well, we'd be really remiss if we didn't tell people where to go to find out all this information. I would assume your website, is that the best place to check all this out?
Great place to go, launchcode.org. You can go there and you can learn all about the Launchcode programs that are upcoming in Kansas City or whatever market you live in, and learn more about the curriculum in those programs, about the expectations for learners in those programs, and all the things that Launchcode does